This is Shireen Ghorbani, and you are joining for a special holiday episode of Both Sides of the Aisle. I am so happy to be joined by Wayne Neiderhauser, who serves as the state homeless coordinator for the state of Utah for the whole state, and previously served in the state Senate for a number of years, was the Senate president. Wayne, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm very passionate about homelessness, as I know you are too. And what I'd love to do is give listeners just a little bit of background on you. Who are you? Tell us about you.
Thank you, Shireen. It's great to be here. The holidays are such a great time, and during those times, it really becomes a focus for people to think about others, to think about people who are experiencing homelessness. I'll just say that we had our memorial last Thursday night, where we memorialized those who passed away in homelessness. The state health department did a report just recently about the mortality rates of people experiencing homelessness. And I'm going to use round numbers here. Okay. But it's usually about 20 years less. Yeah. If you're experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, so your life expectancy, which isn't great in America, but is about about 70, a little less. I think right now it dropped to so for folks living on the street, we're talking 20 years less.
It's a significant health issue, a human issue.
Yeah, that's right.
But just to give you a little bit of my background.
Let's start with you. Okay, yeah. So tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up. I want to ask you some questions about your journey into politics.
I'm a native Utahn. I grew up in northern Utah, Tremonton and Logan area.
What did your family do there?
My dad worked for what was then called Mountain Fuel. Okay. Which turned into Questar Gas, which turned into Dominion Energy, and I can't even remember what it's called today now.
Enbridge.
Enbridge. That's it. So anyway, my dad worked for them for all his career. Yeah. He was the regional manager in Logan, and it was a great job for him. And went to Logan High. Nice. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Aggie.
Are you? Yes. We love it.
I love the Aggies. Yes. Went to all their basketball, football games when I was a young man. Yeah. It was kind of what you did in Logan, right? You went to the Aggie games.
Kind of our own Friday Night Lights. Yeah.
So it was great to grow up there. I love the outdoors as a result. Yeah. Because we spent a lot of time in the outdoors.
Camping, hunting, what do you like to do?
Camping, I love mountain biking, skiing. I learned to ski at the Beav.
Okay, I love it. Yes.
Beaver Mountain. Yeah. And it's amazing what's even happened to Beaver Mountain over the years.
Yeah, big changes.
They've done some changing, but it's still, compared to a lot of resorts, kind of the mom and pa ski resort, which is endearing. We love it.
Not many left. So you graduate from Logan High, you go to Utah State, right, and study what?
I took a 2-year stint, a mission in Florida for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, came back, thought I wanted to be an attorney. Okay. But ended up in accounting. Oh, interesting. And it was like I found my niche in life, and it just gelled for me. Yeah. And so I have a 5-year degree, a master's in accounting, passed the CPA exam, started working as a CPA, and didn't like it. Okay. It didn't gel with me. Yeah. I ended up working for a real estate brokerage as their controller, chief financial officer, operating officer. Yeah. They were regional, statewide real estate brokerage called Mansell and Associates.
Interesting.
The owners are Dave and Al Mansell.
Maybe listeners.
They could be. Great people, great to work for. The company really expanded while I was there, and then was sold to Coldwell Banker in about 2001.
And then tell me about, where did you get into politics?
Well, that's how I got into politics, is working for Mansell. In 1994, I believe, Al, the president of the company, ran for the state Senate and won. Yeah. So he was in the state Senate and became the Senate president in 2000. Okay. And was Senate president from 2000 to 2004. Okay. And I had helped with this campaign as his financial manager and filed all the reports. In the middle of that, I left them on a full-time basis, but was always a consultant, and went and started a company where we developed real estate.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of housing projects.
In the Logan area? Or statewide?
Mostly Salt Lake County, Utah County, and a little bit in Davis County.
All right. Okay.
Mixed use, office, housing.
Sure.
We started that company in 1989. It still exists.
Yeah.
Even though I'm full-time for the state, my blessed partner, Chris McCandless,
keeps it going.
Yeah. And what a great guy he is. I appreciate him so much. But I understood the housing component.
Yep. This is going to be important in the second half of our conversation.
It really is.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were in office in Utah? And what's your perceptions on how it's changed since you were the Senate president to what the Senate president is dealing with today?
Wow. I'm glad I didn't have to go through COVID.
Yes.
I got out in 2018. But how I got in was in December of 2005, Al Mansell, who was then the current senator in my district, because we lived in the same district, he comes out to me and says, Wayne, I'm not going to run again. Would you run?
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. But, he made it sound really easy. And it was not easy. It was the hardest thing I've done in my life times 10 to get elected, because you got to get thick skin.
That's right.
If you don't have thick skin,
it's not for you.
Don't get involved. And I didn't have thick skin. I had to acquire that over time. And that election during that year helped get me into that.
Yeah.
And when I got into I was elected that year, and it wasn't easy. And then for the next 12 and a half years, I was in the Senate. I was the president from late 2012 through 2018.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what some of the biggest challenges you faced in that role were.
We faced some of the largest budget deficits.
I was going to say that
deficits in state history. The economic crisis of the subprime market.
Yep.
And the housing market just being destroyed because of bad policies, fraud, and everything that had taken place in mortgage lending, title, all that. It all came to a head and exploded. And it was a real devastation to my personal business at the time, too, because we were housing developers, and we really didn't have any business for 5 years.
Yeah.
But we sat on some property and patiently waited that out, and then we're able to get back in, and then it rocketed.
Yeah, that's right. And we're still in that.
And we're in this rocket.
Yeah.
And as Senate president and as a leader in the Senate, I was involved with Governor Gary Herbert, Speaker Lockhart, Speaker Hughes, Speaker Clark, some of those.
Yeah.
In preparing the state to really take advantage of an upswing economically.
Yeah.
And we were very successful with that.
Yeah.
And so that's a proud moment in my life to be able to have set tax policy and other policy in the state, laying that foundation in preparation for what was to come.
Was social services or health and human services, was that a big part of your role in the Senate? Or are those areas that, certainly you would have knowledge of, but have become more familiar more recently?
Well, I can tell you that you get a high level view of them.
Sure. Yeah.
But I focus more on
tax
business
reform.
business issues, tax reform, and those things. That was kind of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, sure.
That was kind of my being a CPA, understanding taxes. We worked on reforming property taxes, income taxes, all those things.
And so maybe some of those social issues or social services issues are deeply intimate to you now, a deep understanding of them now. But what I'm hoping we can do in the second half, and thanks for sharing about your background, kind of where you come from, because I'm really interested to spend the second half of the program talking about what is happening with homelessness in our state. What do you see as some of those primary challenges that we're facing, what are things that people in their communities, maybe folks who are listening, can do to get engaged in the issue? And in what ways or have your perceptions changed around this issue? I think for me, my feelings have changed about it a lot, right? I certainly appreciate all of the work that's happening to support, but I do think that there are just systemic issues that need deep attention. So when we're thinking about housing, when we're thinking about treatment, when we're thinking about even how homelessness may or may not be criminalized in particular communities, like all of those kinds of components feel like really big structural issues to me. And I think there's also this kind of foundational moral issue where I mean, we don't know each other well, but I think we fundamentally agree that when we see people on our streets, it's a moral failing of policy, of programs, of infrastructure to support people. But we'll come back in the second half and take a deeper dive into that. So I am Shireen Ghorbani, and you are listening to Both Sides of the Aisle. I'm here with Wayne Neiderhauser, who is the State Homelessness Coordinator. We'll be right back. You're listening to Both Sides of the Aisle on Utah Public Radio. We love to hear from listeners like you. If you would like to send us a comment, email bsotapodcast@gmail.com. That's bsotapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This is Shireen Ghorbani, and you are listening to a very special episode of Both Sides of the Aisle. I'm so happy to be joined by Wayne Neiderhauser, who is the former state Senate president and is currently the state homelessness coordinator. So, Wayne, tell me a little bit about just the role. What is the state homeless coordinator?
Yeah, it was a position that was created by the legislature in 2021. The Office of Homeless Services was created, my position was created, and a governing body was created. At the time, it was a council. Last session, they changed it to a board and made the board smaller. We had 29 before, now we have 11.
Yeah, that feels more manageable.
So all that was created then. The governor calls me, Governor Cox, and says, hey, would you be the coordinator? And I thought, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
The governor's calling. I don't know a lot about homeless services, but the governor did recognize I knew a lot about the legislature.
Yep.
And I knew a lot about housing.
Yeah.
Key elements that the coordinator would be involved in.
Yeah.
So in this position, I work on policy. I work on creating revenue resources to fund services, treatment, housing. I also, we work to break down silos, bringing agencies, departments, local government, state government all together so we have more of a unified direction regarding homelessness.
Yeah.
So one of the first things we did as a council and as an office is we did a statewide strategic plan.
Yeah.
And that statewide strategic plan is on our website. You can go and download it.
Yeah.
It is a living document.
I've read it.
And we're already going to make a few changes to it.
Exciting.
With the board and some of the direction that they have. But the main structure of that strategic plan we're keeping.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me just like personally, you said you hadn't had much experience in homelessness on the side of those experiencing. Tell me a little bit about what you're learning, or how do you think about this problem?
So one of the first things I did, because I knew I didn't know, I went and did a statewide tour from St. George to Logan, from Vernal to Tooele.
Tooele, yep.
And we talked with a lot of providers. And the thing, though, that probably informed me most is my wife and I started to go out every Friday night, and there's a lady I knew politically, and she goes out every Friday night and kind of ministers to a unsheltered population here in Salt Lake. Yeah, the same population every Friday night, offers a meal, offers some love, offers some encouragement, like, you ready to get into housing, you ready to get into treatment, and those types of things. And so we started participating in that.
Yeah.
And we've gone almost every Friday night for about 3.5 years now.
That'll change your perceptions.
And we've built trust.
Yeah.
We've created friends with people experiencing homelessness. We've heard their stories because they're willing to share with somebody they trust.
Yeah.
And that has been so informative to me about what some of the difficulties are.
Yeah.
And I can tell you at the very core of this issue is housing.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
So let me give you a quick data point.
Great.
The states with the highest rates of homelessness are New York, Hawaii, California. Right now, it used to be California with the highest. Now it's New York.
Yeah.
But they're all 45, 50 per 10,000.
Yeah.
The state with the lowest rate of homelessness is quite a surprise. It was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Is Mississippi.
Yeah. Okay.
3 per 10,000. We're 11 per 10,000 here in Utah. Now, what's going on? When I look at the map of the United States and rates of homelessness in states, the lowest states, lower than us, are in the South and Midwest. The highest are on the West Coast, East Coast, and the Intermountain area is actually
kind of high,
getting higher.
Yeah.
Higher in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's going on? Overlay the cost of housing on that data.
I was going to say, the 3 of the states you just mentioned are in the top 5 for most expensive housing. So if I'm not mistaken.
And Mississippi is in the lowest.
Is the lowest. Yes.
And the Midwest is. Yeah. So if you go to Iowa, Kansas, and those states, they have the lowest rates of homelessness, but they also have the lowest cost of housing. So the data shows that at its very core, this is a housing issue.
Yeah.
But I discovered quickly it's not just a housing issue. There are co-occurring issues like addiction.
Yep.
And mental illness, severe and persistent mental illness is a big contributor to homelessness. And until we really figure out as a nation and as a state how we better deal with severe mental illness, we're going to have a hard time solving this problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that this is complex too, because I think there's a sense, what's heartbreaking about this for me is when people know how complex the issue of severe mental illness is, they really know. And for others who haven't had either personal experience or professional work that's brought them into it, I think it can be hard to understand why somebody struggling deeply with their mental health is so at risk to lose their housing, right? And all of the dominoes fall really quickly. You can't maintain, personal care of yourself. You can't show up to work on time. You can't pay bills. You can't find stable and ongoing housing. Family members can only take so much. Like, there are just so many layers to how quickly this unravels. I have a little bit of personal experience with it. My dad struggled with addiction his whole life. We actually haven't, we don't speak in large part because of that. And he did spend time unhoused. And a big part of it was just the exhaustion that our little family unit had with trying over and over again to get him into treatment, to get him into a program. And it's very hard to navigate. And at the time, like, my mom didn't have a lot of resources. We lived a big chunk of our lives uninsured. And she was smart and like well-read and able to navigate systems. And you just think about people who have less than that, less capacity, how quickly things can unravel for families, I think is surprising unless you've lived through it or unless you've seen it up close.
One of the biggest problems is it is very complicated because it's dealing with human behavior.
Yeah.
That's it's very complicated.
Yeah.
And I hear all the time that some city or some state has solved homelessness. Nobody's solved homelessness.
Yeah.
But there's a book out there, and I'm not trying to get people to read a lot of books or enrich Prime somehow.
Yeah.
But there's a book out there by Dr. Insel. Now, Dr. Insel was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health for the country for 15 years under the Obama administration and the Bush II administration. Yeah. So under Republican administration or Democratic administration, but he ran that.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, about 2018 or 2019, he writes a book. It's called Healing.
Yeah.
And a great read about the history of mental health in this country and how people were abused and how these asylums just were an inhumane situation. So we closed all those down, but we didn't do anything different.
Yeah.
And so the default was homelessness and incarceration for people experiencing mental illness.
Yeah.
And we got to do better.
We have to do better.
And Incel, I mean, to get the details, you read that book.
Yeah.
I think he's spot on what needs to happen in this country
to address mental health.
And it's getting people into care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that continuum of care without a lot of gaps, because if there's gaps, not necessarily built into the system or there by just kind of default,
people will fall through.
They're going to fall through them.
Yeah.
And that's why we have such a reoccurring issue, a spin cycle for people in this space, because we need that continuity.
Yeah.
We need that consistency.
Yeah.
And, and it's all complicated by addiction. But guess what is one of the most impactful drugs out there on the street?
You tell me.
It's alcohol.
Yeah.
A legal substance.
Yep.
It has as much impact as anything that I see when I experience things on the street.
Yeah.
In an unsheltered population.
Yeah.
And so, how do you deal with that? I mean, there's illegal substances and legal substances that are contributing to this problem.
Yeah. So, okay. So we've talked a little bit about kind of what's leading up to this. I hear you saying, and I very much agree with you, housing is a key component, addressing mental health, providing mental health services, addiction services, which the state does okay. We could do better. I think in general, a really hard part is getting in, navigating, like either people are resistant to, or it's hard for people to figure out how to connect up people to resources. What can people do in their communities? What are you thinking about when people ask you, I want to get involved, I want to understand how to help? What do you suggest people do?
Well, it's... There's a lot of opportunities to volunteer, like at the shelters, but there's long waiting lines.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of people volunteering.
Yeah.
What we need is more case managers.
Yep.
What we need is more like a navigator helping people navigate the system.
Systems.
What we need is more clinicians, mental health. We need more facilities like the In-Between and the MVP. In Sandy, where we deal with people with disabilities or coming out of the hospital.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having an operation and then you recover on the street? We need those places where people can heal.
Yeah.
And then our whole criminal justice system, it needs to have some reform to it.
Yeah.
And that is, we need to relook at how we can divert people from being in jail and getting them into the treatment that they need. And that may be drug rehabilitation. It might be mental health.
Yeah.
But we got to stop this spin cycle.
Yeah. So I would say there are two things that come to mind for me. One is I do think it's important for folks, if this is an issue that's important to you, to contact your legislators and let them know that you want to see support for homeless services in our state. I think volunteering, you're right. There are a lot of people who volunteer. There are often a lot of people this time of year, but showing up consistently throughout the year is really important to these organizations. And then we have an opportunity to get involved here coming up at the end of January. The state counts individuals who are out on the street. This is not for everybody because the count happens this year, it's going to happen the last 2 days of January, the first day of February, from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. But you can get a small crew together in your community, and it happens across the entire state. I know they're looking for a lot of volunteers still in Salt Lake County, but you go out and you talk to folks. And I would say this is something that is really important because it helps determine what the population is. But it's also a way that I think people can have that one-on-one connection, because one of the things I hear, I'm sure you've heard this too, from folks who are on our streets, is how painful it is to feel invisible and to just engage somebody in conversation. Usually the organizers have socks or warm things to hand to people, and you start to learn a little bit about their story. And I think that connection really, really matters. But as we're departing, can you just give us any kind of closing thoughts that you have on what's important for people to understand in Utah about homelessness?
Yeah, and thank you for giving a plug for the point in time count. It's so important because we have to have data. And so please volunteer. You can go out to the websites of the county and so forth and volunteer. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about homelessness and what are the key factors. I'm guilty. It took me some time to really figure it out. Yeah. And we all just need to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a compassionate side of this and there's an accountability side of it.
I don't disagree with you.
And there's a balance there that we can strike as a society.
That's right. Well, Wayne, thank you so much for joining me today. This is Both Sides of the Aisle. I'm Shireen Ghorbani. Our program is produced by Anthony Scoma. And have a happy holiday.